Hey everyone. All right, so we are going to get started. Just to let you know, my name is Emily Faber. Oh, we got another participant. And I'm new to M². I'll be here for any support, technical support that you need throughout the call. Just privately message me. And just to let y'all know, we are going to be recording this session. It will be public afterwards, so just bear that in mind. Just wanted to put that out there, and I'll turn it over to Heather. Thanks.
I have been connected to M² since its inception. I was the chief operating officer for some time, but I still love being a part of this M² family. Today, I'm really excited to talk to you about effective decision-making and accountability. There's a lot that we can talk about. We could probably spend 3 weeks unpacking decision-making and accountability. But during these times, what I've decided to do is pick a couple of frameworks to offer here. So that's what we're going to be doing momentarily. So we're going to do a quick warm-up. We're going to spend about 20 to 25 minutes talking about how to make decisions and then how to hold people accountable. It's a small enough group that if you just use the raise hand, I'll keep an eye on, if somebody has a question, or you can chime in. I'll pause at various points for questions. And then M² was really intentional about also recognizing that the folks within the network are really intelligent, really smart, and have what to offer as well. So we're going to open this up in terms of the brain trust, right? So you can ask each other questions, talk about some of the challenges or around decision making that you might be encountering. We can case study, etc., within this group. And I hope you'll get a lot out of it. It seemed to be very successful last week. So quick warm up. We're going to go around. I know you've done some introducing on the Zoom chat, and if you have not introduced yourself, I'm just looking for you to provide your name, your location, and how you're connected to M². But for this exercise, I'm asking you just to say your name and what is one item, either literal or not, that you would put in your coronavirus time capsule to mark this moment in our history. So I'm going to stop sharing. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to call somebody. That person's going to do their quick introduction, and then you just invite somebody else to offer their share. Okay. So Melissa, I'm going to start with you.
I was afraid of that because the first thing that came to my mind was toilet paper, right? Like, that's all I'm thinking, right? What other kind of answers are you looking for?
It doesn't matter. Toilet paper is going to be what you want to remember this moment in time by. Fabulous.
Well, it's kind of humorous and yet needed. So, right?
Right.
Why not? I'll go with it.
All right, go ahead and
calling on somebody else.
Yep.
Okay, Rachel.
Hi. This is a great question. And I'm gonna have to say martini glass. Sarah.
Great. Hi. I would have to say it's a little less, little less of an object, but FaceTime. And I'm going to pass it to Julie.
Hi. So I'm going to go with my dishwasher because I've got 2 kids at home, and my dishwasher has not been used this much ever. And if I never have to load and unload the dishwasher, I know that's not going to happen, but yeah, I would love to part with my dishwasher for a while. And I will throw it over to Noah.
Thanks, Julie. I think what I would like to put in a time capsule is the schedules of my kids that I idealized before, like when all this stuff started, because they were so beautiful in mine and my wife's heads. They're almost to the point of like poetic and art, but yeah. I'm gonna throw it over to Masha.
I know. Hi, I would bring everything that you guys said, especially the martini glass, full martini glass. And then, anybody knows what these are? Do you see that they're close to me? Do you see this? It's like arm's reach. This is arm's reach. These are sunflower seeds. These are fried, salted sunflower seeds. You can buy them in any Russian store. And this is my way of, you know, just dealing with it. Devorah, I think you're the only one. Oh no, Emily. Let's go, Emily.
I think I would, I'd try to stuff this window in that time capsule, maybe shatter it and put it in there, because it has been such a blessing to like sit here inside but be able to see what is now a rainy, gorgeously moody day, and picture myself elsewhere.
Emily, where are you?
So I'm in Memphis, Tennessee at the moment, usually Brooklyn, but here we are. And what would you put in your time capsule, Laura?
Well, I spend most of my days on Zoom. So some sort of Zoom reminder, you know, like all of us, not very creative, but it's what I do. I'm based out of San Francisco Bay Area as well.
And I think Arya is on.
Hi, everyone. I'm here. I'm double timing the Zoom. So I'm actually just staying off video because I'm in two places. I would put in Shabbat candles because for the first time in my life, I'm actually observing Shabbat by staying off of technology. It's been a month and it has been the greatest Jewish blessing of my life. It only took us several millennia to catch up to the trend.
Awesome. So I can relate to a lot, even the Shabbat piece, right? My Shabbat practices have increased tremendously, but that martini glass, that's a real good one. I would maybe sub it for a old-fashioned glass or something like that, because I've also been doing some mixology. You know, you gotta entertain yourself. All right, I'm gonna go back to sharing screen, and thank you all for kind of diving into that. But marking this time, right, is really important because as I concluded yesterday's call with this, I'm actually gonna start with today's call. Making these decisions in this moment, no matter what decision you're making, isn't just for the short term, it's actually gonna have long-term implications. So as you might feel like you need to make decisions in the ready, fire, aim methodology, right? Just like go for it. What I'm really hoping that what I'm offering you all today is more of the ready, aim, fire approach, a more systematic approach to making decisions, because I do believe that we're going to look back, you know, and open up this time capsule from today, you know, let's say 20 years from now, and this moment will have influenced the landscape of Jewish education, of the Jewish community, so on and so forth. So with that, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and I'm going to ask you to do one more thing before I get into the content. I want you to think about a difficult decision that you had to make. And I want you in the chat, in 1 or 2 words, to write, why was that a hard decision to make? Like, what was hard about it? Again, 1 or 2 words, why was it hard? There were so many possible options. It was so overwhelming, which is like sometimes a really good problem to have, right? That there are a multitude of options. Was it right? Did I make the right decision? Absolutely. TBD, Rachel, love it. Empathetic. Yeah, it's hard for you to, you're so focused on being empathetic, it's hard for you to be direct. Yep, Masha is agreeing. Love it. Walking away from a project I was passionate about because it was the right thing to do. So making those choices are really hard. And considering the ramifications of the choice. Great. So I'm going to share with you a framework that I absolutely love, and it's called To-Do-Dar. Yes, To-Do-Dar. To-Do-Dar comes from, believe it or not, aviation. Why? Because pilots, when they're flying the plane, right? Y'all have been on plenty of planes. They have to make many decisions under pressure. We might not know it as the people, as the passengers on the plane, but pilots, especially under extreme pressure, have to make very intentional decisions. And David Moriarty talks about this through this model, the To-Do-Dar model, that most pilots have been trained in, how to make these effective decisions. So I'm going to walk you through it here, and then we're going to unpack it. So time, we start with time, right? You have to ask the question of yourself, like, how much time do you have to make this decision? Is this something that has to be turned around in 24 hours? Or is this something that you have a long road to make this decision? Then you have to diagnose, right? You've got to determine the problem, gather the right people, collect the data, you know, figure out the stakeholders. Then you go to your options, which is brainstorming and figuring it out, right? And we don't want to fall into the trap of death by brainstorming, that there's so many options, but there are ways to think about it and hone it in. And then you act, or you decide, obviously, you consider the options, you make your choice. You act or assign, you break down the decision, you begin to act or assign those tasks, and then you review. Is it going as planned? So imagine, just for the sake of this example, the pilot, you know, having to make this decision. He knows he has X amount of fuel in his or her tank, right? And they have a time limit on it. They know what the problem is. They gather the data. Where can I land the plane? How can I land it safely? You brainstorm all your options. Do I land in Phoenix? Do I land in Kansas City? How close can I be or not? You make the decision. Maybe it's the pilot and the co-pilot make the decision with radio control. They act or assign, right? So they assign the responsibilities, and then, you know, they go a few minutes and they decide it's right or wrong, and they course correct, right? So those are decisions under extreme pressure. Now let's unpack it in terms of our work. So before I go any further, any questions? Okay, great. So let's talk about time. These are the questions that if I was about to make a decision, I would be asking myself, right? And it is the when and the who. How long do I have to make the decision? When can people expect a decision from me, right? So I can make a decision, but also sit on it and give that pause before people need to know what my decision is, which is really important. Who will ultimately make the decision? Am I making the decision? Or is somebody else making the decision? A colleague of mine who was formerly at BBYO, now is no longer, introduced me to the something that came from Tannenbaum Schmidt. And essentially what it talks about, what this model talks about, is decision-making and power. So if you, as the owner, or as part of a decision-making process, are just telling people that this is the decision, you're the owner of that decision, right? That's easy. When you start consulting with people about the decision, you begin to distribute the ownership. Then somewhere in the middle is this notion of consent and consensus when you're working with a team and you're building the buy-in and you're getting consent or consensus around that. So that is even more distributed ownership over the decision. But then when things really begin to flip is when you begin to delegate. you are delegating to somebody making that decision, right? And there's a fine line there. And I'm sure some of you are thinking about like, but what if like somebody tells me I'm the decision maker, but my supervisor ultimately is the decision maker? Yes, that absolutely does happen. But the more you can build this type of process into the culture of your organization or to ask clarifying questions, that hopefully will become easier for you. And the very, very last potential is abdicating the decision, fully just distributing it and saying like, whatever happens, happens, and I'm totally staying out of it. So does that make sense to everybody in terms of like the different ways we can be thinking about decisions and who owns the decisions? Any questions there? All right, the last piece is who needs to be at the table as you're thinking about this. Who are the stakeholders, right? Not people that you need to consult or pick up the phone and say like, what would happen, but who needs to be at the table in terms of the decision, right? Once you decide what type of decision this is going to be, who from your team, your board, whoever needs to be at the table. And the tip in this is be transparent and be clear from the get-go who the ultimate decision maker is going to be and communicating that to the group. Any questions about time? Okay. Diagnose. So first, what information do you typically need to make a decision? So go ahead and put that in the Zoom chat. What information do you typically need to make a decision? Who will this affect? Why, who, what, when, where? Awesome. Variables and potential, desired outcomes, all the options and all the possible outcomes. Great. So we're going to talk about options and outcomes in a minute. Before you even can jump to outcomes, just reflecting, I keep wanting to say a clear sense of the outcomes. I never actually have control over that. Okay, Aria, we might have to have a conversation about that as part of the brain trust piece and open that up to the group, because I actually think that there's what to say about that, especially within our field. Before you can even jump to the outcomes though, you need more data points. And we tend to forget that piece because this is where the ready, fire, aim happens versus the ready, aim, fire, right? So you need to really be clear about what's being solved for, what's at stake, and why is it important? You have to be able to answer those questions. And then in terms of tips, what I would encourage is like clear objectives, not outcomes, objectives for the conversation and for what you're trying to solve for. You've got to focus on root causes. Make sure it's in alignment with your priorities. And then make sure also that it's a good use of time, your time and the people that you're working with. Any questions there on the what and the why? Here is where I would say outcomes come, and the options and the deciding. The question is, how will the problem be solved for? So I'm going to offer 3 tools, although there are many for this in terms of coming up with options. One is your traditional brainstorming, and there are a plethora of ways to do that. The second one is probably not something that you're as familiar with in this terminology. Many of you are probably familiar with the post-mortem exercise. What I'm encouraging people to consider is what I call a pre-mortem and what some people call a pre-mortem. Pre-mortem is an exercise envisioning out that once a decision has been made and is in operation, this is what it will look like. This is what it could be, right? So you begin to put yourselves in the shoes of others, your organization, and begin to imagine a world that when decisions are being made, what it looks like. And you can almost phrase it as, we're sitting here 5 months later doing our post-mortem. What do we want to be saying? Okay, pre-mortem. And the last is a risk and impact analysis, right? What are the risks? we're taking here and what can the impact be made? And is it congruent? Does it make sense for us? So again, the tip is still the same from the last slide. So here you have all the options and you have to make a decision. And again, you go back to the beginning. Who's the ultimate decision maker? Make that decision. And then we get to, so here's the decision maker. In the chat, I'm curious to know, how do you typically make decisions? How do you typically make decisions? Sorry, kiddo just entered. Hold on one. Sorry about that. All right, Rachel wrote combination of instinct and data. Right, that gut instinct does tell us something. Talk it through with a trusted partner. That's the consultative work. Ruminating for hours on end and not positive ruminating for hours on end, stressing, then acting. Often consult someone sometime in there. Yep. Analysis of both positive and not positive outcomes, planning, etc. All right, this is all great. What I want to remind you all of in the decision itself, right, is to go back to the beginning. Did you do all the steps of to-do da, right, before you get to the AR, right? To make sure that you're answering this. Brainstorming is really important, right, as part of figuring out the options. Consulting with people. Those people should probably be at the table with you if you're actively consulting them. If it's like a gut check, it's a different story, okay? So one of the last pieces is act or assign. How many of you, by a show of hands, have seen the RACI matrix before? Oh, Emily. Love it. Okay, RACI. I want to preface this with there are a number of different types of these models, right? There's something called MOCA, there's Darcy, there's a whole bunch of stuff. But a decision has been made and now you actually have to get people to do the work because sometimes it's not all on you in some of these decisions. So let me clarify this acronym and then I'll give you an example. R stands for responsible. Who is going to do the work to complete the task? A is for accountable. This is typically one person and one person only who delegates the work and is the last one to review the task before it's complete, right? This person is accountable to making sure it gets done. C is consulted, individuals who provide input on the project or task. They might not actually be responsible or accountable, but you need them to weigh in, right? Your colleague across the hall needs to be able to weigh in. And then the last one is informed. Informed are those who need to be kept in the loop on project progress, right? So they're not necessarily involved in the day-to-day, but they just need to be kept in the loop at various milestones. So how is RACI helpful? So let's say you have a team. Here's a template. This is a very basic template to keep it simple for everybody. But basically what RACI does is you plot your team members across the top on a row, and you put the tasks down the first column. You could add in due date in here as well, if that is helpful. And you begin to assign people based on the task, their role. So for example, I'm gonna be the accountable one to ensure that this is all getting done, but I'm gonna delegate to Emily, right? Writing copy for a newsletter that needs to go out. She needs to turn it to me so that I can review it, right? But in that time, Emily might need to consult 3 people on the team to collect testimonials or information about a program or a project to be able to write about it accurately. And the last part of that task is that Emily, who's writing copy for the newsletter, might need to also keep, or yeah, Emily or I need to keep our CEO informed about the progress that we're making and the ultimate deliverable. And the reason why I think RACI, especially during these times, and as we're all making decisions, is because it is so easy to be siloed now, right? We are all working in home virtual offices. We forget that sometimes our CEO, who typically comes by our office every day to say hello, is not there to say hello. And you don't get that moment to update her on, hey, guess what I'm working on today, or guess where we're at here. And that comes subconsciously. This makes it very intentional and very conscious. Any questions about RACI? All right, last piece about to-do dar is the review. So how do you guys typically check on the progress of your projects? Go ahead and put that in the chat. What do you do to check on that on your projects? Seek feedback, assess with team status and trends and needs for tweaks. Absolutely. Individual project and priority docs with each colleague, and ongoing list of to-dos in order of priority. Great. Track the project plan and touch base one-on-one with the owner. Schedule check-in with teams. Awesome. So you're doing all of the things that you would traditionally do. Yeah, Masha.
Question. Is RACI sort of like part of a project plan? Or is that just
it's a project? It can be used as a project planning template. It can be used as a project planning template. So some people use it as their kind of, you can blow it up as big as you want it to be. Okay, so let's say you have multiple arms of a project. What I would do is put like another kind of header here and write operations, marketing, program, and then putting it all into buckets and the task by buckets with deadlines. And then you basically have your project plan in place around it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's clarifying.
Yeah,
there's Mocha, and then there's Monday board now, and there's just all these,
there's tons of stuff. I'm just offering RACI as an example. There are a number of tools, right? And you can get lost in this. What's just really important, what I really want to drive home, are remembering, being very, very clear about who's ultimately responsible, okay? And then the other roles, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be informed. If you can track that in any other project management tool that you have access to, or any other planning documents that you utilize, great, do it, don't change things. But as decisions need to be made, and especially during these times when we're not physically with people on a regular basis, you can sometimes get lost in the process. So you all offered amazing answers to how you check on the progress. So you can check on your RACI progress on a regular basis. Setting, having strong feedback loops. We can have a whole session about feedback, and setting milestones to ensure that you are communicating with your team. What I find when I'm working with people is that what typically gets missed is the setup, right? The pitch works, the setup doesn't work yet. So slowing the process down to be really, really intentional I think will lead to stronger decision making and stronger accountability for the teams that you work with. So we're going to turn this call into a brain trust now and for Q&A. So, review anything in the chat that people offered. I tried to pick topics and reminders throughout, so you can go back and take a look at that. We can do some Q&A. You can offer examples from your work that's worked, or if you want to seek input from this collective here, and any other suggestions that you might have, tools that you've been leveraging. So I'm going to unshare, and we're going to come back together, and I'm going to open the floor.
I guess my question would be, so you bring in a tool for the team to use, you roll it out, you do all of these things, people are excited, and then nobody's using it, right? And you end up micromanaging, like decisions been made, roles have been assigned, right? But I'm finding myself that I still need to micromanage people, which I hate, because I hate to be micromanaged myself, just because they're not using the tools that, so then what?
Right, so before I chime in with my opinion, I want to open it up to those of you who either are leading teams and utilizing tools and what's worked for you, and maybe if you're on a team and a tool is working for you.
Don't you all jump in at once? And listen, and I think that right now it's just hard. We're all work from home, like we're not, I get that, but I also think it's a indicative of a bigger issue, right? Like if it was so successfully working under normal circumstances, then at least it should work, I don't know, 60%, not at like, barely chugging along.
I think the question I would ask first, there's the tool, right? And then there are tasks and the assignments. Question is who's actually assigning what? Is there a level of autonomy for the staff that you're managing? I'm just putting it out there as a question. Are you allowing enough autonomy for the staff to move within the tool? And if right there, people are not taking the ownership or aren't leveraging their own empowerment to run with the process, there's a different issue there. There's
okay,
right, like
point.
there's a
no,
motivation
I
piece
them,
or communication piece.
Right. No, for me, I want, listen, Debbie, you own the event, right? Project plan it, let me know how I can help, let me know whom I need to communicate with, but you're the owner, right? And if 3 weeks later I have to ask, why hasn't there been a Facebook event for this thing done, right? Like, you have the autonomy to do it, you have all of the access, but yet I now have to go back and check every little single task. And it's like, how do you hold people accountable for their ownership of things?
I'll jump in. So I manage our young families team here at the Chicago Federation. I think at least that last question you asked, I think it really comes with relationships with that's at least for my team, first and foremost, it's like the trust building piece. And I think that also just comes with time, and maybe it's not something if you're hiring a new person on, I think there's with a new person, it's going to take a lot longer to build that trust and build up those relationships of, not having to micromanage. But if there's someone that you have been working with for a while, I feel very fortunate right now that I've got two people right under me that I give them so much autonomy, but I'm also freaking out because one is actually leaving at the end of the fiscal year. And so I'm going to have to go backwards, with one of them, and thinking about that sort of decision making and things that I haven't thought about for the past couple years, because I've given her autonomy and she's been able to do it. I'm going to have to go back and now, come up with a new way of thinking and a new way of building those relationships again. So.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because the team is fairly new. I mean, they're all under a year, under 6. I mean, yeah.
And I think age too comes with it. I think our team is also, a mixed age and experience and what their background is. So I think there's a lot of factors that come in. And as much as right, you don't like being micromanaged, so you assume that you don't want to be that kind of manager to also micromanage. But I do think there's some people need that, unfortunately, for a little while. So I think there's a balance.
So if you have such a new team, right, and I agree, I would say experience drives a lot of it, like what people are able to do. Sometimes people just don't know. And I begin to think also if certain tasks, right, like if certain tasks are assigned very broadly and you hope that people know like the 20 steps that go into that one task, especially in these times with a new team, I would be as clear as day, right? Like the clearest day you've ever seen, right? To make sure that they understand what those 20 tasks are that fall under a broad assignment. Somebody who's been working in an organization a year plus, who's been on the cycle, who knows how to do things, then they can kind of run with it. But folks who haven't been around a long time, and especially today with the pressure that people are feeling and the uncertainty that they're feeling in their world, right? Like we didn't even touch about social emotional and what's going on for folks right now. I think taking the extra step and breaking it down for people, you don't necessarily have to do it on a RACI, but to talk to each staff member and say, these are my expectations, might be helpful. Other things that have come up for you. Aria, are you okay if I go back to what you said about just reflecting that I keep wanting to say a clear sense of the outcomes when I never actually have control over that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Do you want to add a little bit more color there for us?
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to be raw about my perfectionism being a major drawback to the capacity to take more quick action, and the reality that, you can spend 45 minutes like pulling your hair out over writing the email exactly how you want your colleague to take it, and still it's going to get taken how they want to take it, and you have zero control. So it's mostly, what I mean is like I'm stifled by this capacity to control outcomes that in the scheme of things I can't.
I'm seeing a lot of head shaking here. Anyone else want to chime in? Noah?
I think for me, I can very much relate to what Aria just said, but also that has to do with trust issues. Like sometimes no matter how clear a person is, it's all about the articulation and the mutual understanding that both people are on the same page. There has to be some qualifying conversation that, allow me to understand what you're saying, okay, and just help me understand it a little bit, and then let's step together to the next step. That part of the process, sometimes even when you do, and the person repeats it back exactly as it was said, and there's still a breakdown, just because of human nature. So that sort of throws you back into the perfectionism element of like, okay, I just know they're not going to be able to do it the way I need it done. And then learning to be a little more flexible in what perfect looks like is the skill that seemingly needs to be adapted.
You just opened up so many different topics that I just want to add.
I didn't mean to open
No,
up.
no, it's so great. So I'm gonna pick two for right now. You know, this whole notion of good enough, right?
Mhm.
And my rule of thumb is I'm also a perfectionist, very, very type A. Everything has to look and feel and, you know, all of that. But my new rule is 75 to 30% of my work is perfect. The rest is good enough. Because my good enough is probably at a higher level potentially at somebody who's not going to care about it in the same way that I care about it, right? And I have to remind myself it's more about me than anybody else I'm interacting with, because they don't know, right? You guys don't know how long I spent working on this PowerPoint, right? I would say this falls in my 25 to 30% of perfectionism, but you know what I mean, right? So just think about that in terms of you. Where does perfectionism and good enough come into play? And where do you draw that boundary and for what reasons, right? So it's a reflection exercise. And then I forgot, give me 1 second to come back to, it'll come back to me. Anybody else want to share? So the other thing that I thought Aria was also going down is control over mind. Oh, I now remember what I was going to say. So you all are within the M² family. So you all have heard this in some way, shape, or form, and I'm just going to remind you. In Jewish education, in the M² world, we talk about we can control what we teach, but we can't control how people learn. Unfortunately, fortunately, we also live in that reality when we're managing people, when we're working within teams, right? When we're sending a communication, right? We can control what we bring, but we can't control how another person is going to take it. So I would just give yourself a little bit of grace and compassion in that space. You know, this is where the empathy comes into play, and, you know, trusting that folks are coming at it with the right intentions and we're all on the same team, so on and so forth. But just remember that, you know, when Shuki said that to me years and years and years ago, it still resonates with me today in almost anything and everything that I do. So I just want to go back also to what Aria was saying earlier, and I thought you were going to take it a slightly different direction, which came up on yesterday's call, which is, so often I live in this space of, you know, trying to make decisions, and I think I come to a decision and recognize that it's actually not my decision, it is somebody else's decision, a board member, a teacher, a committee member, a CEO, president, executive director, a supervisor. So then the question becomes, well, like, how does that get reconciled, right? Because you think you know what you know, and then as people say, the rug gets pulled from under my feet, right? So I'm curious to hear from the group your thoughts on that in terms of decision making.
I definitely think that there's a level of, I'm sorry, I definitely think that
go ahead.
When, especially if you're working with a board, everything else, the downside is that the paranoia level is affecting your decision making. Like, are they on the same page as me in terms of vision and understanding like what I'm trying to accomplish, and is this going to be in line with that, and in line with their understanding of the vision versus what they're going to think of the the concept or anything, and then how's it going to play out? Like, it's almost like you really have to be able to look at the foresight of all the different scenarios of how each individual is going to be understanding and then reacting. And it creates this sense of paranoia unless you're so either egomaniacal or you just have such confidence and passion in what you're communicating, you don't even care what they have to say. And it's an interesting dichotomy and tension to feel, because there's like, especially when it's something that your whole heart and soul is in, you're worried about it getting ripped out. And
I want to, sorry for interrupting. I'm curious to know from this group, how many of you are managing people right now? Okay. I think what's really important here, Noah, what you just said, as a manager, to put yourself in that kind of mindset, to remember that, you know, people are, I hope, putting their hearts and souls into this, right? And so again, it goes back to clear expectation setting from the beginning, right? So you don't get derailed at that point, so you don't like shatter somebody completely. And I also encourage you to think about where collaboration comes into play. What are the milestones, what are the touch points that you want to have with your staff, especially around decision making, that will help to influence the outcome? And then also perhaps pondering, are there opportunities to empower those around me in the decision? 100%. That goes into that, you know, how much of the decision are you going to maybe delegate or use a consensus process? Absolutely. So just a nice little reminder here as well. Little wins for everybody goes a long way. Anything else that's top of mind for this group? Any case studies that you want to ask about? Go for it.
I don't have a case study, just something I think when I like read the description, and it's just something I've always sort of struggled with, is like second guessing myself in decision making. And, you know, I think ultimately, like, because of where I sit and have, you know, been at my organization for a long time, I've clearly made right decisions or good decisions that have elevated me, but it's always been something, you know, that my supervisor has always said to me, like, your first answer is usually a right answer, your gut decisions are usually good, but it's just something personally that I've always struggled with. I just, you know, looking for, I don't know if anybody feels that way as well, that they like always second guess themselves, and how do you move past just like going forward with saying like, this is my decision, I'm making it, I feel good with it, and moving on with it. So, I mean, obviously like it always happens that like the decision is made and I have to move on, but it's just something, a feeling. Like I'd love to not have that feeling of second guessing myself, but I don't know if that's just a normal feeling.
So yes to that. And then I take it even a step further where, so for example, you know, like it's something that we've discussed, but it's not happening, or it's not happening the way we discussed it. And then I go back, I'm like, am I crazy? Am I nuts? I don't understand. I thought, and so my way of coping it is I started bringing, you know, somebody else with me. So at least the two of us, like, we can't be crazy together on the same thing, right? Like, okay, maybe. But yes, Julie, to answer your thing, second guessing is always, you know, I think it comes when there are issues, then you're like, was I not clear? Was the expectation too high? Is it not the right match to the skill in a person? You know, all these things that come up.
So not just saying that this all makes sense, and also having a mentor to bounce things off of is so valuable, for sure. And it's the weight in which you want to put on certain decisions, right? Like, you all are talented enough to know when a certain decision really needs to have a certain level of buy-in, and so on and so forth. We put a lot of burden on our shoulders. I just want to recognize that when we're making decisions, and that second guessing piece is totally human nature, right? That's what happens. And what I would encourage you to do, and if we had a lot more time, one of the things that I love studying and talking about, this woman by the name of Marilee Adams, if you're interested, created something called the choice map. There's learner mindset and judger mindset. When we're in judger mindset, we begin to judge ourselves. There's self-critique going on there. There's judging questions that begin to happen. And obviously the learner mindset like keeps you with an open mind and curiosity and so on and so forth. What I encourage you to do when you start feeling yourself go down the path of, I'm second guessing myself, oh, that doesn't feel right, to ask yourself a question, like recognizing that you're even having that feeling is amazing, right? That you're having that inner dialogue. But is there one question that you can post somewhere that will switch you over into the learner mindset? Which might be, for my switching question is this how I want to show up to people in the world? Masha, it was great to see you. It's okay, totally get it. I had one of those just a few minutes ago. So what is a question that will bring you back into the realm of like, I've got this, we're gonna learn from this. And I always ask this question, what is the worst that is going to happen? And then if you wanna go like really like optimistic, what can I learn from this? If it doesn't go the way I want it to do, what can we learn from it? And I'm hyper aware that if it's not gonna work, I'm gonna pivot really quickly because I'm capable of doing that too.
I would say that this whole experience is like exactly what you just said. Like we're capable of pivoting. Nobody had any clue that this was going to happen. And, you know, so, right, like that's how I'm feeling right now is like, I don't know what I'm trying to lead a team, but like, I'm being very transparent with them. Like, I don't know what decision is right or wrong right now. And I don't think anybody does. So I've given myself permission to say that to them, which I think has been helpful for me. You know, to say we're in this together and we're gonna try something and it's gonna work, or we're gonna try something and it doesn't work, and that's okay right now. So
Julie, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I do think that this time in our world is leveling the playing field a little bit. I don't really know any better than anybody else about what's gonna happen in 3 weeks' time, right? Maybe the medical professionals, but like really, like we don't know what's gonna happen. So everything has been leveled here. And the fact that you demonstrated vulnerability to your team and were very transparent with your team about it, that's what helps innovate, right? Innovation and iteration. And I strongly feel, like I said earlier, that this is going to change the field for the better. So the more you take those risks and make smart decisions, but be ready to review and tweak and analyze and redetermine or redelegate who does what, like go for it. Now's the time to do it, which I know is scary when you're also trying to keep your programs running, the money coming in, you know, how do you take programs that I was doing face-to-face, virtual, how, you know, I get it. There are lots of things that are happening, but you know, what can you take a bit and iterate and dream and be vulnerable? Anything else for the last 2 minutes? So I just want to thank you all for taking the hour out of your day to be on this call. I hope you got a nugget of something out of the conversation. I wish you all the best of luck during these really uncertain times. I know it's not easy and we're all seeking for answers, but remember, and I know this is very cliche, but we are in this together. I'm also, for those of you who have access to the mentor moments and mentor times, I am a part of that team. I am a part of that team. Oh my God, I've been going since 6 o'clock this morning, my time. I'm in California. Feel free, sign up. I'm happy to chat with you more about this or anything else that comes to mind, okay? Everyone stay healthy, be well.